Hi, everyone. Well, I promised you a surprise, and I think this is going to be a wonderful one for you. Do stick with it because it's going to get much more out there as we progress in this conversation, but also much more in here. That's what I anticipate. So I'm going to introduce you to Dr. David Clements. And thank you for being with us, David. Thank you, because you're doing some really special work, incredible work in the world. So, and
Thank you, Pam.
just to introduce you to everyone out there who may not have heard of Dr. David Clements, you started life very much as a mainstream academic, PhD, specializing in string theory, I believe. So where your doctor comes from. So you're a theoretical physicist with advanced
Yes.
degrees from Oxford and Cambridge universities, which traditionally are our most respected universities in the UK. So you're very much following that mainstream academic route as a theoretical physicist. And then life started to change a little bit for you. So just
Oh,
sort of
yes.
a little bit about sort of going from mainstream academia into what happened to turn you in a very different direction.
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much, Pam, for inviting me on. And it's a really wonderful pleasure to meet you and I hope we're going to be good friends from here and and hello to your audience as well. So yeah, it was a bit of a weird upbringing because I I had a very strange beginning. I should start before I jump to your question because for a little bit of context, I probably very proud to having been expelled from nursery schools and had a very weird upbringing. They didn't know what to do with me, and as I was growing up, I didn't have a scientific bone in my body. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I really wasn't that wavelength at all. And I was very artistic. I love building, sculpting, creating. I was very imaginative. I was always floating around in the ethers. And something happened around, let me see, around when I was about 14 years old, I think. And suddenly I just started getting really interested in mathematics and physics. And then I just sort of, and I didn't know anything about the high self, consciousness, spirituality, any of that stuff at the time. I was just, just a usual kid. And so I took A levels in maths, physics, and chemistry, and then really I just felt this real drive to do an undergraduate degree in mathematics and physics. But the one that I did was I opted to do a sort of double degree. So I did a degree in mathematics and physics at the same time, which everybody thought, "What on earth are you thinking?" And I just felt I want to do this. I have to do this. So I did that. And again, at that point, I was very, even from a young age, concurrently with this, I was very interested in everything up there with all the things flying around, the experiences that people were having. I just very drawn to just learning about this and just the whole subject. So that carried on throughout. And yeah, but at this time, again, I had no idea. I used to have arguments with my mom about spirituality and stuff because she was, more in that camp. And I'd be saying, no, 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 that's just completely unscientific, very kind of, in an egg-headed kind of way. I kind of laugh at myself the way I used to carry on sometimes. And and then I obviously went to Cambridge, and I was really at that point really looking to become a mainstream theoretical physicist. I was fascinated with peeling back the layers and trying to understand how everything worked. I really had this drive to do that. And then I went to Oxford to do my PhD, and it was in my first year then that a couple of major things happened, really. The first one was that I just got this feeling that what I was doing was not describing uh, true reality and the true energetic behavior of reality as we know it. And I started getting itchy fingers thinking, oh my God, this is not what I thought it would be. I'm not sure I really want to, to take this further. And I was at a loss because I thought, what do I do now? I'm in my first year. I've got, 2, 3 years more to do. And I'm starting to lose my faith in this. And at that time I started typing on the computer and looking for, different keywords, energy research, that kind of thing. And I came across Tom Bearden, who I'm sure many of your readers, and I'm pretty sure that you know about Tom. got in touch and said, "Hey, I'm doing this. I'm really interested in your work because if you're doing what you're saying you're doing, this is holy cow stuff. This is amazing."
It was
I wrote
Tesla.
him
He
an
was
email.
very interested in Tesla work, wasn't
Yes, exactly. He was a massive proponent of Tesla, and a wonderful guy, Tom. Really, really big bear of a guy, but very gentle, very solid. Morally as well. And anyway, so I didn't expect him to write back, but he did. And I thought, whoa, I was like a kid on Christmas, jumping up and down and kind of really excited. And we struck up a really quick friendship. And he was really interested that someone from an academic body like Oxford was interested in his work. And I was just lapped it up like a cat with milk. And so yeah, we carried on that way, and about maybe towards the end of that year, I moved in with some friends of mine, and one of them knew how interested in UFOs I was, and he brought me a book about all sorts of phenomena, including remote viewing. And this is the first time I ever heard about this. And so I read this and I thought, oh my goodness, are people actually doing this? And these people that were really adept at it were bilocating and finding themselves on other planets and all sorts of cool things. I thought, dude, I really want to do this. This is so cool. So I hopped online and saw if anybody was doing any courses, and there was a particular company. So I ordered their kit. And I wasn't sure at the time if I could do it, if it was for real. I thought I'm going to try it and see if it works. And did this test so they write a series of numbers on the back, for those people who aren't familiar with remote viewing, that is consciously located to the target where you're remote viewing. So you don't see the image, you don't see anything, you just see the numbers, which is a little bit like an address for where you're going to review. So I'm sitting in my room and I'm doing this target. And then suddenly this rumbling starts appearing in my ears. Whoa, what's that? You know, and it kept going. And I thought, okay, maybe it's where I am. Maybe it's just really windy or something because it's really strong. I'll keep going. And you can move around the target. And when I went into the middle, this hot liquid just started flowing all through my body. And it was really visceral. It wasn't like very light. It was really, really quite palpable. And I thought, oh my God, I started doing it, and the sensation got stronger and stronger and stronger. And then your vision starts to see an overlay. I thought, okay, I'm going to put this down now because this is kind of getting a little bit too intense. And I remember walking out to the kitchen to see a friend of mine, and he was there, and this noise and this fluid sensation kept going. And I thought, God, is this going to stop? And eventually it did settle down, and I went back into my room and flipped the card over. It was a volcano. And I thought, wow, I had no clue about what it was, and those sensations are 100% what I was doing. So I knew that was what it was. But later on, I found my higher aspect moved me away from them because there are certain protocols in remote viewing which kind of I find are in for my research and what my team had in mind for me were quite limiting in what they wanted me to do. So they kind of helped me to let that be an activation to jumpstart me, and then they started to move me into what I consider to be sort of like remote perceiving, I guess, in a word. It's similar, but it's without the protocols, and you have to sort of train yourself to be very still and just purely observe everything, rather than doing the protocols of way people get into remote viewing. So by that time, to answer your question, so that was a bit of a long-winded way around, but just to give
it?
people a bit
Wonderful.
of grounding. I had this dichotomy because on one hand, I was an academic doing research and I had to concentrate on doing that. And on the other side, I had this other life where I was, working with Tom, doing this other stuff, and whole worlds were beginning to open up for me. So it was quite a balancing experience, you could say, Um, and yeah, so I did find it a little struggling to finish my PhD because so much of this other information was starting to come through. And I realized like a perception of the way the world was working on a deeper living conscious level was opening up. And the mechanistic, very strict language of mathematics that I was being taught to use and apply seemed a world apart from where things really were. And yes, it's true that when you get down to very grounded, very structural things, the language of mathematics is pretty exceptional at describing those processes. But when you go into the real depth of what makes up matter and fields and things of those nature, you realize that there is living intelligent consciousness that when it compresses itself down and becomes almost ball-like, the behavior of its energy makes it look like it's just completely, not consciously, created or directed or in any kind of flow. It just looks like it's mechanistically bouncing around, just doing generic things. And so that's really how physics sees reality. And that's exactly as a theoretical physicist, that's exactly how we were trained to think, how we applied everything that we did. There is no consciousness there. It's just purely scripted mechanistic rules of describing material behavior, and that's it. But I did finish my PhD, and I thought, okay, well, I'll get this finished and do it. And then Tom was very kind. I went over and they invited me to take part in a documentary called Energy from the Vacuum series, which I don't know if you've seen, or some of your members may have seen. And it was a wonderful experience. And I was blown away. I thought, well, all these other inventors have done this cool stuff. I haven't done anything yet. I'm sort of fresh off the wall here, you know. But Tom really wanted me there. And he's such a great guy. And I asked the director, I said, well, I'm not sure why you want me here. And he said, well, this is Tom's list and you're at the top of it. And I said, "Oh, I'm blown away. I don't know what to say." And I said, I don't know why, because like I said, I haven't made anything yet. These guys have. So Tom was a lovely guy to me. He was a really, really good guy. And so I got invited to go out there, and my goodness, what a shell shock that was. The stories and experiences Tom has been through are extraordinary. I mean, he told me some of them, and I was just sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm this little kid from this country town. This is way over my head. And it was crazy banana stuff. And there was one time I remember we were sitting there and they were setting the cameras up. And Tom, the phone rings while we were, and I was sitting on the side chatting with Tom. And he picks it up. He goes, "Yep, okay, thank you." Okay, puts the phone down, gives a laugh, and he goes, "Oh, that's just somebody letting us know we're being listened to. So careful what we say." And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, did anybody mention my name?" And it was a very bizarre, surreal experience. And there were so many other stories, way too many for, I don't want to go too much on that, but.
So
So we did this.
was it with Tom that you got into the spiral counter-rotating vortices as well? Was that with work with Tom?
Yes, it was ignited from there, definitely. And well, actually, I guess in a way, it was his friend John Bedini, who I also got the pleasure and honor of working with as well. Because after I went home from there, Tom set me up with a postdoctoral position research in Scotland. And the idea was to replicate Tom's machines, try to mathematically model them and work out how they were working, and then introduce that wisdom into mainstream academia, which didn't happen, as you can imagine. And so, because of all the pushback and everything. But anyway, so Tom set me up there. But while I was there, the people who made the documentary said, well, we would like you to do a segment with John Bedini. You can come over, you'll meet John, and we want you to help with the editing of the more sciencey stuff that we're not sure quite how to put together. And I said, yeah, I would love to. I mean, and I didn't know too much about John at that time. But when I got there and started to look at some of the material they already filmed, I thought, wow, this guy is really, he's on the same level as Tom for sure. And these guys are good friends. And that was the first time that I had because I never experienced Tom's device other than what we were building and replicating back in our labs in Scotland. I never felt it operating, and I was quite sensitive at that time, and at that time already working with my some of my teams. And so I went into John's lab and he took me. He's a funny guy. He swore like a trooper, but he was the funniest guy ever. He was a really, really great guy, always joking around. And he took me into this room where some of his devices were operating. And it's hard to describe, but basically there was this room with this open door. There was a double door open door, no actual doors on it. It was just an open space, but it was a two door open space. And it was just a wooden, there was no metal in it whatsoever. It was just a wooden unit he built within this industrial unit he had. The second I walked through that door, the energy went really high. And I thought, whoa, what's happening there? And John looked back to me, looking kind of weird. It's like, what's up with you? In the funny way that he did. And I moved back out again and put my hand through the door. And the change in energy from out here, even though the door was open, there was nothing stopping it physically from coming out. It stayed within the boundary of the room. That was the first time I had encountered what I call conscious living energetics, and to feel it behave in that way, in a conscious way, and decide that it was going to stay within the bounds of the room. And I just kept doing this and putting my hand in, putting my hand out. Kind of John was thinking, is this nuts? You know, and and so I walked in, and it was just a really elevated environment. And I said, John, the energy in here is really off the charts. He said, oh, that's cool. Well, now let me show you how these things are working, you know. And so he went through all the details of his devices, and they were very simple. It's basically anyone can make them, and he published all these circuits for people to go ahead and make their own. And it's just, he literally had this bike wheel. I'm not kidding. It was a bicycle wheel with magnets taped on the outside with a coil, but the coil was very special. It had to be two or more winds of copper in a DNA helix, and that was very important. If you did it straight wire, it doesn't do the same thing, which is interesting because all of our electrics in our houses and everything, it's all straight wiring, right? You've got nothing like that at all. And so it was replicating the language of how DNA channels and funnels energy, which is very interesting. And when you think every cell in your body contains countless, tens to the order of goodness knows how many strands of DNA that are all doing that. You know, think of the capability of what human DNA is capable of. And so we filmed him charging a capacitor, which is just obviously electrical device for storing charge. So he'd run this machine and he'd take the energy off and he'd put in the capacitor, let it charge up for a little bit. And then on film, he would then discharge it and just take the wires and go crack, and it go bang as all this energy came out of it. But when we took it frame by frame and went back to the position where the flash happened, and as everybody is familiar with, when lightning happens, it's always that lightning blue. When you get an arc of electricity, it's the electric blue that we're all familiar with. Now, this energy wasn't, it was like a luminescent green, like an aquamarine type green type color. And I found that extraordinary because, you know, supposedly the color of lightning is to do with the makeup of chemicals in the atmosphere. Well, it's the same makeup here, but we're getting a different color. What is that? And so that really began my interest in, you know, these types of fields and what was happening. And so I came away, I replicated John's work, built my own, tested them, and I became really interested in building them purely as generators of this energy that they could create. And I witnessed the same thing. You know, I put it on my living room and it would not go out the bounds of the living room. You could walk in and out. It wouldn't, you know, it would respect the boundaries of the living room. And pretty soon when I sat down and meditated and you could interact with it, and it was a consciousness that you could work with, you know. And so this really was the first spark of, you know, to come to your question, of my research into living energetics. And really to describe the difference, because we're all used to physical material, you know, energy and matter, and, you know, like your cushions in the background or the wall or anything like that, you know, solid matter that you can scrunch and do things with, and it will just sit there. Now, this is the interesting thing. And I find that what my teams have told me, that as energy gets compressed and it gets compressed and compressed and it gets compacted, it starts to behave in a very, very simplistic way that it's almost like the operating system or the operating behavior of that energy becomes so confined, it then behaves as the material that we see around you. But at the heart of it, at the core of it, is living consciousness energetic, compressing itself to make itself behave as the formation of matter. And so this is where the principle of spinning comes in. And I don't think it's any coincidence that human DNA has the design that it has, the conscious design that it has. It's absolutely designed to spin energy around. And to give you an example, there was a researcher called Dr. Peter Gariev, a Russian scientist, and he was playing around with lasers. And there was two incredible things that he found, which I thought was fantastic because it physically gives an experiment to the information that my teams were giving me. And the first thing he did, he wanted to see if light itself could carry information. And he took two hermetically sealed containers, one with salamander eggs and one with frog eggs. And he would shine a laser through one as they were developing embryos into the other. And lo and behold, the final one, it would pass through one and into the other. And bear in mind, these are hermetically sealed. So no air, no liquids, nothing could get in or out. It was perfectly sealed. The eggs that the laser would shine on would rewrite itself and develop into the species of the first one. I mean, how cool is that? Now, to add to that, he decided that he furthered his experimentation, and he started to fire lasers into DNA to see what was happening, and the light would go. It would spiral up and down the DNA, and it would just energize, and it would stay in the DNA. And the profound thing that happened, he found that would last for a number of days. And then even if he took the samples away, the physical DNA away, the light was still doing that as if the DNA was still there. And so there is this, for me, for the information that my teams have given me, there's so much more to the makeup of space, as we call it, and the apparency of time, and how matter is and exists within that. And even if you take it away, how the space has still morphed itself and still contains the characteristics of the energies that were once there. And, and if you want to delve a little bit into that, and jump in any time if you want to steer any questions, of course. One of the things a lot of people talk about is when they go to a place that has had deep trauma or something, like there's been a battle there or something like that. And they talk about being able to feel the energetics still lingering. Well, one of the things that my team showed me was that space is like an energy node system. The apparency of distance between us is these multitude of interconnected energy nodes that can store experiential information. Just like light can convey experiential information from the one embryo type to another embryo type, it can transfer. And so when something's significant enough, when something is really traumatic or a lot of emotional charge, that imprint gets stored in the spatial node system in that area. And when people talk about cleansing spaces and clearing spaces, I believe what they're actually doing is they're restoring those nodal systems and cleansing those of the experiential imprints that they've gained from those events. And so there's such a massive amount of amazing stuff that comes from this. And when I remote perceive the photon or a packet of light, because in the quantum world, it's all about packets of information or packets of energy. And so a light field, the packet of light field, is a photon. And when I see it, it's this massive living library. And that's what my teams confirmed to me. Said that, yes, it is light that hits you from the sun, that bounces from you to somebody else. It collects informational energetics from everything it touches. And so everything expands as one ginormous conscious symbiotic organism in light. And so in that way, when people talk about getting codes from the sun, there's a solar flare, or that to me is very real. The photons that come from the sun are loaded with high energetic coded information that when you experience that shining on you. Those codes get downloaded and you absorb them, and then you can impart your own onto that leaving light as it bounces off you. And so there's this beautiful multidimensional living library system that we're in that seeks to share knowledge, gain knowledge, and impart it all over the place. And as human beings, as receptors, as we learn to be more perceptive to this and we understand the energy information exchange that's happening, the gaining from that is just profound and extraordinary. And so to me, it was a real, oh my goodness, that's just super cool, and the amazing things that can be done with that, and people talk about the sun being very healing. Oh, yes, it is, because every time you bathe in it, you're gaining all those amazing codes that were designed and for you to absorb. And so this whole area of living energetics my team started working with me and said, right, okay, so we're going to help you design certain things which, will help you understand better. And we
Could
have
you
a big
talk about who
device.
your team are, David, as well? Who your team
Yes,
are?
yeah, sure. That's a good question. Yeah. So when I describe my probably around, let me see now. So when I first started my PhD, I was about after I met Tom, and then I'd done my remote viewing. The remote viewing aspect allowed me to kick into gear my intuition, and that's when teams started coming across, and I started doing meditations. I did some courses with people to do with Pleiadian light work. And then once I made that contact, it was nonstop. It's like, that was it. I'd been pushed over the edge. And so initially, my teams that I worked with were Pleiadian in nature, and probably around maybe about I might be a little bit vague on the timing here, but about 2 years after that, the Arcturians started to step in. Now, the Pleiadians are wonderful, beautiful, gentle, very advanced beings, and incredibly heart-centered, and just like the Arcturians, but the Arcturians have a much, I guess, more focus on the energetic science of things. They're incredibly adept at that kind of thing. And the interesting thing about it was, though, as I was working with them and they were giving me this information for different designs and concepts, they were encouraging me to say that they said, look, David, you have to understand why you keep coming back to your mind, which we understand because of your background. And that's the trouble I had, because I get this information, I go, I try and pick it to pieces with my mind. And they were like, okay, back off. Let him have his moment, kind of thing. And but they were very patient. I could feel them smiling, and I thought they were being a bit cheeky with me or something, but they were trying to get me to realize that there is a vast difference between perceiving things from the heart intelligence, that center, and working from the intellectual mind, which itself is a beautiful instrument, but it is a structural instrument which is designed to work with and create structural events.
So
But they
they
said,
were using your physics knowledge to direct you to build these living consciousness devices, essentially.
yes, very much so. And I see why I was impulsed to do all the courses I did. I had to have that background in order to get because they could show me it, but unless I could pick it to pieces, because when they give you the information, it's like a quantum snapshot. So it's not like, okay, here it is in a blueprint, and you just, oh, great, okay, I'll just take that, and kind of. It's a quantum snapshot is like there's no time expanse in it, and there's no spatial expanse, because in the quantum world of things, everything is everywhere and nowhere, and every when and no when at the same time. It's not like we're used to in linear time and expansive space. And so it's all in one point. And so you have to sit and perceive and unwrap the quantum ball, if you like, or the quantum perception of what they've given you into its component pieces, so that you, as a being at this level, can then piece it together as it was meant to be pieced. So it is a little bit of a process, and it took me quite a while to get the hang of it, because it's like, because as a human being, when you get this stuff, you're so excited, you get frustrated when you can't understand what it is you're being shown. And so they were very patient with me, and let me just unfold in my way, and said, you will get this. You go through your moments, and then settle down, and then have another go. And but the Arcturians came through one time, and I built this initial. It's like a toroidal type of coil system, which is DNA wound, and it's a very specific type of coil system, which generated this profound energy. And I was working on this, and I said, yes, I need to get the next bit and do my heady thing. And the Arcturians came in. And when I hear them, it's probably helpful for your audience as well. So as you learn to be more heart-centered, it's quite an experiential thing where you feel what they're saying very deeply. It's not like you hear words or anything. It's almost like you really experience the awareness of what it is they're trying to convey, which is very important, because they said, you're going back into your head again, and we want you to know that living and being from your heart center is vastly different from operating as a living consciousness from your mind. And they were trying to say as well, I feel, that if you do operate through your mind, so much will elude you, because it will only be looking and can only perceive the structural qualities of what it is you are looking at. But you are looking for non-structural qualities that underlie the structural stuff. That's the important bit. And so I had to learn how to do that. And when I first turned this device on with my team, so it was the Pleiadians and Arcturians at that time, this energy field went straight out of this thing. And it's just the elevation and the height and vibration was off the charts for me. I hadn't experienced that before. And I was so excited because my wife was at work at the time. Dude, you got to get back here. You got to feel this. I was texting, and I was so excited. And as I was texting her, she was coming down the corridor, because we were living in an apartment at the time. I said, "Do you feel it yet? Do you feel it yet?" It's, yes, I can feel it. It's fine. Let me get home. And and what I experienced from then, having that device on, was really vivid, visceral, clear dreaming. Then it's like suddenly in the dream state, you would get very clear information, and my sensitivity, my perceptibility would really start to increase. And so we had that on for a while, and then our teams came in, and it was still the Pleiadians and Arcturians at this time, asked us to move to New Zealand. And they said, okay, cool, that sounds great. And we were excited to do that. And while we were there, they said, right, now it's time for you to start putting things near this device and see what happens. So we thought, okay, got any suggestions? They said, well, what about the food you're eating? They said, okay, well, I just made it. How long do we have to put it? Is it going to go cold? And so we took our plates, and they said, don't worry, it's just a few minutes. But the transformation of the material itself and the food was phenomenal to me. It tasted light. It tasted like it had been really elevated. And later on in my research now, I've discovered what they were telling me was that as you begin to release the compression of matter, the matter itself starts to behave more consciously, more luminescent. And so, these stories of, these masters who had glowing bodies and all this sort of thing, that to me is very much akin to what they were showing me, is that eventually what humanity is going to end up with is living in luminescent material bodies. They will still have a material quality to it, but the behavior of that matter, the intelligence of the matter will be very different. It'll be very akin, and it will be the perfect point of anchoring for your higher aspect. And I believe that's where we're going as living beings. We're not just ascending as a being within. We're expanding and ascending the physical material in our bodies so that it can behave as a proper bedwork for our higher self to live and function through in a high dimensional way, in a high consciousness way, because at the moment it's very limited. And a lot of people say, oh, I can't hear my higher self so much, and all this sort of thing. And I believe that's very much to do with, part of that issue is to do with, yes, there are, of course, channels that need to be cleared and changed, but it's the living material needs to start jumping up to make you a proper receiver and receptor for that level of energetic as well. And that's what's happening with matter, very slowly, bit by bit. And what I feel was happening with these devices was it was starting to changed the compression characteristic to the energetic fields that we call matter, so that they could step up and behave differently. Living light was starting to very gently emanate from them. So it was this kind of principle that they were really getting me to look at. So yeah, it's a phenomenal journey. I mean, it took me quite a while to get what they're understanding, because it was so different from, everything that I had been trained to think. And I had to really offload that and put it to one side. But
So
yeah,
essentially, it's regenerative. What you're working on, what you're developing as living consciousness is regenerative. So it can optimize the state of being, whether it's the food or the human being. It can obviously neutralize the degenerative energy that we have all over our world right now. So
yes.
it's incredibly beneficial in raising our consciousness as well. It's going to really help us to shift our consciousness as well.
Yes, and that really, the teams that I work with, that's a fantastic question. I'm glad you answered that, because I think there's something that I'd really love to share with your audience on that. Is that the because of the level of compression that we experience physical matter at, it appears to behave as what I call dead matter. It just bumps around. It doesn't do very much. You knock it, it just moves. It doesn't have what appears to have a living, intelligent makeup to it. And and so the physics of matter at this level is very aptly described by mathematical equations and so on, because it itself is a very structural, what I call, I mean, for want of a better expression, a non-living language to describe things which themselves are just mechanical structures, because that's the language of mathematics itself, excuse me. But when you release the compression, and suddenly new living energetics can take place, and now the matter behaves in a different way. People talk about plasmas, and there was a scientist called David Bohm.
Yes, yes, I wrote about him in my first book. I know
Oh,
his
you
whole
did?
job.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay, so okay. So yes, so you'll absolutely know that he was one of the first people to describe the self-organization of plasmas. And to me, at the time when I read that, I wasn't sure what he was meaning by that. But in this work, as I started to develop this, I realized that's what he was keying in on. He was seeing that, because plasmas are in a state where the compression is, to my perception, the compression of the material components has actually changed itself. It's not just matter behave like an atom and an atom behaving differently. The matter itself, I believe, has actually transformed to a certain degree. And so living energetics start to come into play, and now the matter appears to be self-organizing, but it's almost like the matter is just waking up, where it has a level of intelligence where it can start to behave in an intelligent, sort of almost amorphous way, like like a liquid, like water can, behave in those ways. So that really is a very good example of waking up living energetics, or awakening matter, because I believe awakening matter goes hand in hand with our conscious awakening, because when you have a vessel that can occupy or allow that level of intelligence in, everything changes. And so that really is the nature of the research into living energetics. And so that really, because a lot of people, I've had asked questions about, oh, how would you describe this mathematically? I said, well, you can't. The living energetics is not um, it has structural qualities to it when it wishes to do that. And certainly in matter that we see around our room, that's highly compressed. But the more you move up in higher and higher, the less structural it becomes, and the more living energetics and different principles of energy behavior start to come in, which you can't describe with mathematical language that we have, because it is specifically a language for describing inanimate structure, or apparently inanimate structure. And it's very good at doing that. But then when you go higher, you lose the perception of it. And that's what my team's always telling me. The second I would try to formulate what they were doing, or try to, they were saying, you can't grab this. You can't control it. It's a living consciousness of itself. you can work with it symbiotically because it is you and you are it. But trying to collapse it down and say, yes, this is the formula for its behavior, it's not going to do that. It's going to behave the way it intelligently wishes to.
And it
So,
operates on intentionality as well. So it helps you manifest your
yes,
intentions as well.
yes, it does. And this comes back to the way I see it is the source field as it steps itself down in varying different stages of compression. Some people talk about the fractal universe, and the way I see it is, yes, it does have a fractal quality, but the higher you go, it doesn't stay as a fractal as we know it. It becomes an amorphous living field that can fractalize itself and stage itself down in different stages of what you call fractal compression, for want of a better word. But there is this thing where eventually, as my team's tried very hard to get me to do, kicking and screaming sometimes, is that eventually you have to let go of structural perception and move into the quantum perception, which is non-structural, for want of a better phrase. And so it was quite a difficult transformation for me to go through that. And I had to do a lot of clearing and a lot of debris washing of all of my previous perceptions. And it was tough. It was tough at times. I wasn't sure if I was able to do it at times, but getting there now, the field itself is just beautiful. We have this device here, which is a big device. It's about the size of a small room, generates these beautiful energies. And Michael Sala came here to have a look at what we do as well, Dr. Sala. And he was really blown away by what he saw in his wife, and they could really feel the energetics being generated by this. And Michael describes himself as somebody that doesn't normally feel those things, but he could really feel that. And, it's such a lovely thing having the environment with that working. And I believe that is the future of where humanity is moving. We are moving to where matter is going to it is waking up now. It's starting to luminesce. The energy physics or behavioral physics. I don't like using the word physics too much because it makes it sound like it's quite a confined process, but it isn't. It's a very fluid, living, energetic one. And as matter starts to awaken, so much is going to change. The planetary body itself is going to change. People will start to experience the living library exchange of experiential information between themselves, another human being, another being, the earth. You're going to become a powerful receiver transmitter of experiential information, exactly as humanity was designed to be. This place we're in at the moment, being in a very super compressed, very dulled down, virtually no senses working state, that is not the way humanity is supposed to live and operate. No way, and so yes, and with the progression of this flow of information, I started to get a connection with what I now call the infinity point.
Yeah, I really want to talk to you
And
about this. Yeah.
yes.
Talk
And
about
so,
you talk about the sacred heart, and I'd love to talk to you about what you mean by
yes,
and the infinity point and all that you
yes.
share in your meditations, which are beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, certainly. I guess I should start in the very beginning. When I was still in Scotland, I started to work with consciousness, which was very feminine in its nature, it's very heart-centered. And what they were trying to help me do at that point was learn to be more heart-centered. And at the time, it seemed like such a dichotomy because I was so used to working, in my head. And but this very gentle presence was trying to say that, no, to move forward, moving your consciousness to be centered in that heart intelligence, everything else is going to reshape and change around you. You will think differently, you will feel differently. Everything is going to up level in ways that you don't realize right now. And that in itself was difficult work because it involved shedding so much stuff. It was quite hard at times. But what they were showing me was that the human heart has this connection to the energetic heart, or some people call it the heart chakra, or many different words for it. But that in itself is embedded in a much more expansive system called the Sacred Heart, and that is the heart that exists in the center of what we call the soul vessel. Now, in the center of the Sacred Heart, which is the sort of center point of the soul in a way, is the infinity point. Now, from what my teams have told me, the sun has an infinity point, the earth has an infinity point. And what does that mean? Now, the infinity point is your direct access to the infinite source field of everything that is. No interruptions, no anything. That is your direct path straight there. And nothing gets in the way. Nothing can get in unless it is you. Its ability to discern what is unimaginably formidable in a way of speaking. Only you can get in there because it is your infinity point. It is your access way. Now, we have done meditations where we go into and close to the infinity point of the sun so people can experience a very powerful infinity point emanation to help that download of information when they absorb it to then unpack that so they can develop further with that as well. And the infinity point is literally the source energetic, the source consciousness. And there's no real word. I mean, I say these phrases, but nothing can really, there's no sort of, how can I say, there's no way of quantifying it. It's just an expression that gets close to, but never really touches the essence of the source intelligence that's behind everything. But what I tell people is that you all have this infinity point and you have full access to everything that everybody else does. So I say to people, when you catch yourself revering somebody, and if I find people do that to me, I said, you need to stop there, stop there. Everything that I can do, you can do as well. What's stopping you? And, and I explained to them, you have an infinity point inside you, which is the same energy or essence consciousness, whatever you want to call it, that created everything, this universe, other parallel universes, all of existence, the multi-level of it. You did that. You were part of it. So what makes you think that you cannot do what I'm doing or what they are doing? You only need the openness and the receptivity to have that experience in you and then to do it. That's what it is. And to me, that's a sacred thing because and the Infinity Source Creations platform that I run is devoted to doing that. I really feel that empowering people to let go of their self-doubt, their suppression in a way, because that's what humanity has been taught to do. Don't believe in yourself. You'll never get there. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. The usual stuff, No, 100% false. The source creator connects to you as you through your infinity point and emanates through you if you let it. And that's the key thing, because source intelligence, absolutely no exceptions, respects free will. So if you choose by your free will not to let it in, it won't come in. And it's the same behavior we see with the devices as well. If you invite it outside the door, it will come out. But it absolutely respects free will. It will not overrun them. And so even if somebody is having the worst experience possible and, really wants help, if they are not by their own free will willing to open up to allow that energy in to do what it needs to do, it won't go in. It will simply gently try to remind you, it's here, it's available. All you have to do is open. And that's a great thing for me personally, and I've seen a lot of other people as well, can stumble on because, it in a way, humanity just needs to be reminded that all of that is available right now to you. And the Palladians once said, you can ascend right now if you want to. All you have to do is fully let go. But as human beings, it's like, what? Do what? It's a challenge.
Habituated, aren't we? But
Yes, yes.
David, I love the way on your Patreon channel you have these long, beautiful, very fine meditations to help people connect to that infinity point. And that's the real focus of it, isn't it? The Sacred Heart and the infinity point, which is beautiful. And just last week, you were with your group actually anchoring in a new light intelligence energetic into the earth. Can you tell us about that? I mean, that sounds so exciting. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, definitely. So what happens is that So again, a little bit of a story to build up here is that about it was just before the new year of 20, we were just about to go into 2024. And I was out walking with my family, and it was just before New Year's, and we were just hoping to sit down and catch some fireworks. And this presence just came right out of my heart center and introduced itself. This is the infinite source intelligence. There's no other, like I said, there isn't really a word or phrase to describe it. That's just my best version of, describing the non-structural quality of infinity. And this presence came through and asked for me to now adapt the platform to be able to help people get in touch with their infinity point, to have their own source connection, their own relationship to the infinite essence within them. So I was over the moon. I thought this is the beautiful feeling of peace and love as in ways that I've never experienced before. The kindness and compassion, the serenity was just so beautiful. And when it comes through so deeply, your heart muscles literally tickle. I'm not kidding. It's like somebody's taking 1,000 feathers and tickling your heart muscles. It feels ecstatic. It's really beautiful. And I thought I would love to be able to help people feel that I felt then and feel. And so one of the things that my teams have also been saying to me, imagine a world where every living being on this planet operates from that level of intelligence, of serenity and beauty and peace and respect and intelligence and love for themselves and for everything else as well. This world is going to be leaps and bounds. It really is. And that's where I believe we're headed. And so really what they've been doing is before that, an expanse called the Elohim, which wanted to start the preliminary building of the awakening of people's material energetics. As I was working, and they still are part of the teams, but they kind of stepped back a bit and letting the source creation take center fold now, if you like. And so they began the process of starting to elevate people and awaken people's matter, so that the infinity point can start to come in deeper and have a deeper connection. Because the infinity point, the energy through there, I believe the Sacred Heart is like a lens, and it lenses the infinity of source into the particular being that is you. So, like when you go to the cinema, you have this light that lenses through the film, and then suddenly it becomes this film before it's pure light. And in a way, the Sacred Heart, the infinity point, acts as like a lens. So it takes that pure and infinite source intelligence and lenses it into the true being that is your higher self, the real you. And that lensing is unique. There's no other lensing like it is for you, and that's by design. So all these unique lenses can create these unique creations and come together and co-create together and do all these amazing things. It's very much by design the way I see it. And so the source intelligence has been guiding these meditations to come through to help people get deeper and deeper access. And this recent meditation that you asked about was literally about beginning to help the earth as well to start awakening the matter within the earth's body, and to help people have a much more deeper symbiotic connection with the earth, because co-creating with the earth is absolutely central as well. Being fully grounded in a very symbiotic energy flow with the earth is absolutely pivotal. Now, the energetic they introduced were the seeding, once they had done that, were the seeding of these very beautiful light code packets that are very gently going to unpack themselves as people are receptive and ready to have them. And they're all part of helping humanity. And again, because source intelligence absolutely respects free will, it waits for people to be willing and take the step and choice to let those unpack. And so all throughout the meditations, the source intelligence is always asking for people's wish to go forward, to open to this, to do this. It's never directed in the way, I guess, it's so profoundly respectful of free will, which to me is if anybody asks, well, how do you know you're working with source intelligence? Well, that is the key there. Lower intelligences don't care about free will, and they'll just walk all over it like it was mud. But source intelligence will never do that. It co-creates with you, even though it comes through you. It always works co-creative and collaborative. Oh, you know what I mean?
Collaboratively.
Collaboratively,
Collaboratively.
yes. And so it works in that way. And it's so very gentle and playful the way it does it. It's always looking to get you excited, to get you joyful, but it does it in a way of an offering. And so that was what was done. And the feedback that what people were doing who took part in it, and anyone, those global ones will always be freely available to everyone, are, just is so beautiful to see the shifts in people as they do these. And suddenly they start to feel the source energetic coming through in one way or another. And sometimes it's very slight, sometimes it's very, very strong. And to me, that's fantastic. I love being able to help people do that. And in the end, I say to people, well, in truth, it's not really me that's doing it. I might facilitate the meditation, but really you're doing it for yourself. That's the important thing. I always look to empower people because that's the truth of it. Nobody is above or below anybody else. You have the same access I do, and I have the same access you do. There's no difference. The question is, how do you choose to lens the energetic you're getting? What do you choose to create with that? And that's a really beautiful knowingness, I feel, that of the many beautiful things I've gained from doing this, from my teams, my higher self, my source self. Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Now, David, I've heard you say that it isn't just the Earth and humanity that are ascending, it's the entire universe.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing is, because of the interconnectivity of the Earth and everything else, one of the profound things that the teams, and we've had so many other teams that are from star systems and galaxies well beyond our own. They are so keyed into what's going on here right now because of the nature of the Earth, the energetic conditions of its interconnectivity of all of existence as well, the profundity of what is going to happen on this planet and the knock-on effect of everywhere else simultaneously is simply beyond explanation. It is, I mean, I could say the word profound, that doesn't do it justice. It is extraordinary what's going on here right now. And everyone sitting here on this earth, as a slight message from me, even if you're going through difficult times, you have front row seats to the most profound experiential experiment that has ever been, because not at any time has this been attempted. And it's working so well. And it's guaranteed now. All this is just going through the last little hoops and stages to where we get to where we want to go. So hang in there and know that you have the front row seats, and yeah, you're sitting right next to the action. So it's, and you'll get the benefits that these other beings would love to get. And that's another reason they love to work with us, is because by working with us, they get to share in that adventure. But we have the front row seats, and they are just over the moon for what's happening right now.
That is just so wonderful, so reassuring, so validating to hear. So, just as
Yeah.
we close, David, is it possible that your team may want to share a message for humanity as we enter 2025? What would they
I
say
could
to us as we come into 2025?
I could feel the rush of sauce wanting to come through just as you said. Okay.
Goody.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so greetings, beloved forms of love. This is the source intelligence speaking through this point to the very same point within you. Beloved souls, your journey, I would say, is just beginning. But the unfoldment that is happening, particularly in this year, and with the overlay of the leaving chaos that you see around you, is going to be transformed in ways that you cannot yet imagine. It is known that it is difficult for you, and this message is given to you to help you better feel and know that your transformation into the light, whether you choose in this incarnation or the next, is guaranteed. Nothing is going to prevent it. You see, this experiment with the apparency of the lack of light, that in your perception you call the darkness. It is, in effect, the apparent lack of living intelligence, which can at any moment of your choosing be filled with living intelligence. And like an analogy, when you walk into a darkened room and you turn on the light, what happens? All perception of darkness instantaneously disappears. You see, dear souls, you are returning to the truth of who you really are as living light in form, having what you would call a human experience. You are transforming in this very moment. Do not entangle yourselves with the chaos that is leaving, because as the light enters, just like the light switching on in the darkened room, it disappears because it was never really there to begin with. But you see, your perception of it and your reaction to it is what gives it the sense of realism you perceive it to have. And this is made possible by this level of density and polarity. And like the experiment that this one likes to tell, if you put a virtual reality headset on, you could very quickly convince yourself that what you perceive is really happening to you, where in truth, it is a created illusion. And so it is with darkness. And so this message is, as you feel yourself struggling with your inner difficulties, which is really simply your own holding on to illusions that you don't yet realize that you have, be still. Be quiet within yourself. Ask, if you wish, to be connected with your infinity sacred point, to be imbued with your higher self love light intelligence, and offer both your holding on and the illusion to which you are holding on to that intelligence, and see how fast it disappears. And to your question, dear one, we will say this: the path of humanity is beyond your imagination. It is that beautiful. You are like a flower learning to grow through the darkened spaces of the soil, to break through, to realize the tremendous amount of light that awaits you. This is how we would describe your situation right now. And sweet ones, you have broken through. The veils are dissolving. You have pierced them because you have changed the perception within yourself to such a level that you have attained a consciousness that realizes, whether subtly or deeply, that you are beyond those fictitious veils. And so in the coming months and years, as you allow it to be, and that is the key word, sweet ones, will you allow it to be? Because that allowance does not change the trajectory or where humanity is going, but it does change the speed, the perception of the speed of your getting there. And so find the moments of peace to be in joy, detach from the outer goings on, for this is the illusion dissolving, sweet ones. And while it will appear to fight and try to perpetuate itself, that in itself is an illusion. Allow it to leave, allow it to dissolve. Disengage and come into your center. You will find all the aspects that trouble you in your life will very rapidly transform around you, because you will transform from perpetuating chaotic illusions to being in peace and exuding peace. And so your life can do nothing but transform into that very same thing. We will leave you with this. Your future is beautiful. It is as profound and beyond your imagining, and it is going to transform in ways that you do not expect. Enjoy this adventure, sweet ones. You have chosen to be here. You are now at the final opening of the curtain, where things that are going to be revealing within you that are going to change you in ways that will bring such sweetness, such harmony, such adventures that you have not dreamed of. This is yours, dear sweet ones. It is coming. Nothing can stop it. And so it is.
That
All
was
right.
really, that was really beautiful, David. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed that myself. There's a few little nuggets in there for me as well.
Yeah, it was really beautiful, and just a beautiful ending to a wonderful shared experience with you. And I'm so grateful. I know you're incredibly busy, and I'm so grateful for your time in sharing with us. And people, I think, can get in touch with you. I will leave your website details below, and also you've got a very active Patreon group with all these beautiful meditations and activations, a lot of which are free. And I know your work is just going to go, pun not intended, in quantum leaps from here on in, and really suggest that you follow David's work, because it's very precious. It's very special. Thank you so much, David, for all that you're doing for the world.
And thank you, Pam, as well. I'm delighted to have been invited. I'm so glad. I hope we can continue this friendship, behind the scenes on, and thank you to your audience. And it's a profound gift for me to share this with you. And I hope that your audience, gets the nuggets that were intended from this in whatever way, that it enlivens you and brings you the peace and source connection that I know so many of you are longing for. So go right ahead, have that adventure, and go for it. Definitely.
Beautiful. Well, David's work can help you so much with those connections to the infinity point, the sacred heart, and to elevate your consciousness. Beautiful, David. Thank you so much. Loved it.
You're very welcome. And love to you all. Thank you so much.
Love to everyone out there. I'll be back ever so soon. Bye for now.